Mother Nature is a terrifying temptress when she wants to be. Our world is rife with horrors, and the footage in this video will send chills down your spine. Brace yourself to discover just how chilling the world can be. These are 20 times people have seen scary things in nature. Number 20. Snake crushing a van. Another way to describe this video, while respecting the first one, is damn nature, you're scary part 2. If you haven't seen the first one, you should go and check it out. But for now, let's watch this snake crush a van. Or at least that's what I'd love to tell you, but instead I'm just going to show you an example of people freaking out at nature when nature honestly didn't do anything wrong. You see, back in February, a viral image would spread around showcasing a snake that was wrapped around a van of impressive size. Now, naturally, people thought that it was something real, and they feared that there would be major snakes trying to crush all of their vans if they got to the wrong place in time. However, if you look more closely at the van, you're going to notice that it actually isn't being crushed at all. Plus, you don't really see the snake's head. Not to mention, if there was a picture of this, why wouldn't there be a video of it as well? I mean, we are in the 21st century and all. Anyways, that's because the whole thing is fake. Yeah, as Star Trek would once say, it's a fake. But it's not a fake that it was intentional, if that helps out. Instead, this was part of an art installation in the area, and it was meant to shock people, but not to make them afraid of nature. Now, that begs the question, could there actually be a snake that could crush a van? Well, not in the current version of nature. The longest snake out there is recorded at about 30 to 33 feet long, depending on who you actually believe, but their weight would not be enough to crush a van without some considerable effort. Then again, nature has surprised us in the past, so you just never know. Before we go on, like this video, smash the subscribe button, and click the notification bell right now, or this centipede will crawl on your face when you're sleeping. Now it's time for the sweet topic. Caterpillars are supposed to be small, but if this cocoon that was found is anything to go by, then there are some surprisingly scary and big caterpillars in the world, and that's terrifying. Because if there are giant caterpillars, it means that there are also giant butterflies and moths. At the size of a human hand, if one of these things flew at your face, you'd be terrified. Damn, nature, you're scary. As always, let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below using the hashtag #SweetTopic. Number 19. The catches. Now I'll be talking about the oceans and the creatures within them many times during this video, so you'll need to be prepared for that. But one thing that has definitely gotten people scared are the various fishes that have been caught by anglers all over the world. Because if you think about it, what do fishermen usually search for? Things like bass and carp, maybe even a marlin or a swordfish if they're brave and strong enough. And if you go to places like Hawaii, you're going to find all sorts of fish that the locals and people worldwide alike love to eat. But those fish aren't exactly scary. That's why when a fisherman gets something that's not expected, they tend to freak out, because while anglers are capable and knowledgeable folk, they don't know every single fish in the sea. For example, one man in Russia would post a series of catches that he made over the years, which included the bearded sea devil, a frilled shark, and a fish that's literally known as the chimera. He even found a creature that was known as the sea spider, which is something I'll never want to see up close for obvious reasons. Anyways, the point here is that nature freaks fishermen out quite a lot because they'll pull their lines in to try and get the biggest tuna or perhaps some other fish they're hunting, and yet they'll get something like this and wonder what the heck they're even looking at. And that reveals one of the dark truths about our world, that we don't know everything that lives within the deepest parts of the ocean. We've seen glimpses of it, and some of them I'll talk about later in this video, but to those who are close enough to the surface to catch them, they may end up finding something that will seem monstrous or alien. Yet, it was just Mother Nature all along, proving that we don't know all of her creations yet. Number 18. Arapaima. In the case of the Arapaima, Mother Nature has brought up a creature that many people thought was extinct, but was just residing in a place that many people don't actually get to dive into, the Amazon River. The river is one of the longest in the world and has many tributaries and such, and that's where the creature known as the Arapaima lives. The reason that people are scared of this fish is that it's the largest freshwater fish in the world, measuring in at about 10 feet long. But if it was just a fish that was meaty and had a length, that wouldn't be a lot of a problem, right? Except that because of how long it's been on the earth, it has certain defenses that set it apart from other fish. The Arapaima is an armored beast, and that means not too many things can harm it within the river itself. So you basically have a 10-foot long armored tank of a fish going through the Amazon, which can be scary. But here's the biggest kicker. The fish is also known as a living fossil, as it was believed to have died out tens of thousands of years ago, depending on the scientists that talk about it. And yet it is still alive. It's part of a small group of animals that have that distinction, and they mostly are all to be feared. In fact, the simple act of existing, despite being from bygone eras, is just enough to make anyone scared. I mean, after all, if they're alive, then what else might still be alive? As just noted, nobody knows everything in the waters of the oceans, but we might not know what might be in the waters of the rivers as well. Mysteries upon mysteries. Number 17. A tornado. Now we'll shift gears a little bit and focus not on beings of nature, but one of the many acts of nature that are terrifying by default. Speaking, of course, of natural disasters. These can come out of nowhere and rock people's worlds to such a degree that they become devastated afterwards, and I'll be talking about them all throughout this video, beginning with a tornado that took place in Vietnam. The irony of this video is that at first it doesn't really seem like anything bad is going down. Yet, the man in the vehicle is yelling at others who happen to be in the street in front of him. But things quickly deteriorate and the tornado shows its power soon enough. At first, it's only debris that's getting thrown around, but then the tornado's intensity picks up and whole entire buildings begin to get ripped up from their roots and foundations, and everything just goes flying. It gets so bad, in fact, that the driver has to go backwards to get away from the epicenter of all the carnage. Given some of the debris that's swirling around in the air, that's a smart idea, because if any of that had hit his ride, he would have been in serious trouble. The video is just 48 seconds long, and yet the street is basically unrecognizable by the time that it's finished. That's the power of Mother Nature right there. And when it comes down to it, it's all just wind blowing at an incredible speed and not having anything to block or stop it. That's why when the tornado sirens go off, you need to really be sensible and get out of there, or else risk a lot of harm, if not worse. Let this video be the ultimate warning to you. You don't want to be in the path of one of these tornadoes when they come for you, because you're going to regret it. Number 16. The Swarm. What are some of your worst fears? Now, don't worry, I'm not going to tell anyone. Just say them out loud if you don't want to put them in the comments down below. But if you do, that's great as well. One of my greatest fears is waking up one day and my pet guinea pig Twinkle no longer loving me. But I digress. If you put bugs or swarms of bugs, well, you're not alone. Both in your fellow viewers and myself, we could all testify that they're annoying. Now, bugs, well, that's just in their singular form. If you're talking about massive numbers of them, well, they suck so much more. And it would be one thing if I were talking solely about like a hive of bees or hornets or something, but rather I'm talking about biblical swarms of bugs that sometimes engulf people across the planet. Yes, these are real things that happen, as this video shows. As you can see, a man is straight up driving through a swarm of locusts. Then he foolishly gets out of the car, and you'll see that they're so numerous that they're basically the shape of a cloud from a distance. That's how numerous and tightly packed they are, which is both unnerving and frightening to say the least. Thankfully, the man did get back in his car and drive away, but it doesn't take away from the fact that there were monstrous amounts of these bugs in one place. Plus, we know that it happens all over the world sometimes. One time in the United States, a swarm of grasshoppers flooded an area so badly that they were affecting the weather radar. They were even finding ways into people's homes. One bug is bad but manageable. A couple of bugs, very annoying but you can deal with. But a whole entire swarm, run away as fast as you can. Number 15. Donical depression. Alongside forces of nature and the beings that nature births, there are sometimes whole entire places that nature creates that are beautiful, but also terrifying to behold once you see the truth behind them. A great example of this is the Doğa Depression in Ethiopia. If you look at it from the viewpoint of just pictures, you're not exactly going to be scared by it. In fact, the place has a color palette that many feel is quite breathtaking. But that's because you're looking at it from afar. When you actually go there, you're not going to like it very much. That's because the Doğa Depression lies at the triple junction of three tectonic plates, meaning that it was built by three different plates rubbing against one another, and then it started to spread apart. Due to this, the area is riddled with depressions, volcanoes, and bodies of water that you don't want to touch. That's because these crater lakes are not only very hot, but they're also extremely acidic due to the conditions and materials that make up the area. Just the general area of the Doğa Depression is enough to make you sweat, as it's one of the hottest places in the world in terms of being consistently hot. You'll also sweat just by being there, which is not something that everyone wants or needs. In terms of life, only microorganisms and other things of the like can exist in a place like this, and ironically, that's what's made this depression a place that many scientists want to study. That's because they feel that they're good indications of what places like the Moon or Mars might even be like in terms of potential life, if not life on other planets. Still though, you'll not want to go to this depression unless you feel depressed yourself. Number 14. Electric eel. Now we'll get back to the rivers of the world to talk about a creature that many know to fear even if they're unlikely to come across it. I speak, of course, of the electric eel. This being, known more accurately as the hagfish, is one of the most well-known beings in the world because of what it can do. True to its name, it has three organs in its body that can generate electricity. Given that our own bodies do the same, that would not be a cause for scare, except that when you remember the electric eel can do it up to 600 volts. That's going to give you quite the shock then. The other thing you need to remember is that the electric eel is aquatic, so this beast is sending out an electric charge that's going through water, and that's going to boost its power. It'd even be more powerful in salt water, but you know. And exactly how strong is that jolt? Well, it could potentially kill a human if they're unfortunate enough, and it has killed creatures like crocodiles while being filmed. In one case, the croc was trying to eat an eel, and it shocked it so hard that it instantly died. Now, to be clear, the electric eel does not openly seek out humans. The only reason that they would probably shock you is if they felt that you were a threat or you accidentally stepped on them, and you're not gonna go and do that, right? So if you're in the areas that they're in, which include the Amazon River, do be on the lookout for them. Number 13. The trees. When you think about trees, the only real thing that probably naturally would scare you is if one of them got struck by lightning near you, or perhaps if one of their branches suddenly dropped down on your head. But it has happened in the past, and I speak from experience on that one. It's quite scary. This next one, though, takes the cake on the fear factor that trees can cause. For about the first 12 to 13 seconds of the video, everything seems fine, but then it's, just some people driving down the road as if nothing's wrong, because nothing is at that moment. Then you begin to hear trees cracking, and when you see one fall well ahead of the car, it's scary because you saw it happening. But it's not enough to make you really freak out. That is, until it keeps on going and things keep building, and then trees start falling one after another. Even when the driver floors it in reverse, the trees are almost seeking them out as if they want to hit the car, and eventually one does, and when you least expect it, no less. That's when the people try to get out of the car to get to safety, and more trees hit them, and it finally ends. Just try to picture that for yourself when you're in the car, when everything goes down like that. The fear would probably be tremendous, and if they were hit by the wrong tree, the story could have ended a whole lot more worse than it did. Number 12. Dead man's fingers. Picture this. You're going through the woods and noticing all the flora and fauna around you when something odd catches your eye. You swear that it looks like fingers, but they're all black. And as you get closer, the shape of them really does look like fingers. Are you you seeing the remains of a person sticking out of the ground? Well, thankfully, no you're not. What you're actually seeing is a mushroom-like fungal growth that can be found at the base of dead or dying trees and shrubs. Because of their shape, texture, and contour, they look like fingers on a hand, which is why these things have been given the not-so-glorious name of dead man's fingers. Now, some types of dead man's fingers are produced by wood-decomposing fungi, and others are made that cause black root rot. Either way, when you see them on the floor of a wooden area, you're likely to freak out a little bit because no one wants to find a dead body in the woods. Yet that sometimes does happen, but then again, it's not happening in this situation, it's just a fungal growth. What really sells the illusion of the growth is the length. They can be up to 4 inches long at times, and that's more than long enough to be mistaken for fingers and freak out about what you thought you found. Number 11. Hickory horned devil. We'll get back to insects because, sadly, it's written here and I have to read it as part of my job, but you'll understand why. We're going to the being that's known as the hickory horned devil very quickly. First, though, I want you to picture the last time you saw a caterpillar. No, really, go ahead. How long ago did you see one? And I'm not talking about the centipede at the beginning of the video. What did it look like when you saw it? Was it nice and long and clearly in the early stages of life, or was it getting bigger so that it can make its cocoon? No matter what your answer, I'm pretty sure that it didn't look like the hickory horned devil. Yes, that's right, the hickory horned devil is a caterpillar that I'll never be able to get out of my mind now because of how freaky the thing looks. Those protrusions, as they're called, are enough to make the thing look a lot less like a caterpillar and a lot more like a monster that's coming to destroy you. Now, if the thing was an inch or two long like a regular caterpillar, I probably wouldn't have a problem with it. However, if you're going to find a large one, they're going to be longer than a human hand, plus those protrusions can sometimes be over an inch in length. The good news here is that these things are harmless to people and most animals. They only eat leaves, and so I'm guessing they have those protrusions just to look menacing. And it works. Number 10. Shark attacks. To be frank, it was only a matter of time before I talked about sharks, because they're easily one of the things that people across the world fear more than anything else. This is partially because of things like pop culture, which tends to glamorize shark attacks, and they do make a ton of movies about them, which includes ones about tornadoes. But the thing is that whether provoked or not, shark attacks are an extension of a natural disaster, because when a person gets struck by a shark, it rarely ends well. People have been killed by sharks, lost limbs to them, and been maimed and come up with scars that never fully heal, but that's the real tragedy of it all, you know. You'll usually never see a shark attack coming, and when you do see or hear the accounts of them happening, they tend to chill you to your core. Number 9. Snapdragon flower seed pod. The snapdragon flower is a tale of two forms. There's the form that's when it's alive, and the form when it's dead. And when you plant them in your garden, you're going to see that they can emerge with a beautiful variety of colors and perhaps perfectly match your other plants. However, when they begin to shrivel up and die, that becomes another story. That's because, as you can see in the pictures on the screen, the snapdragon flower seed pod looks like a human skull. When you have several of these skulls on things like a branch, it's going to look as though the tree itself is sprouting dead things. But why does nature like to do that? Well, it wants to torture us, perhaps. What did we even do to deserve a plant that does this to us? Number 8. The anglerfish. Now we'll head back to the depths of the ocean to tell you a tale of terror that is well known these days. That's the one about the anglerfish. This is one of those creatures that lives in the midnight zone of the ocean, the place where light doesn't reach. As a result, the anglerfish developed a devilishly clever way to get its prey. It has a protrusion that can emit a bright light in the darkness of the waters. Fishes go up to the light because they become curious, and then the anglerfish will bring its mouth closer and closer until it chomps down. But that's not the only scary thing. This species only gets showcased because of the females, as they're the bigger of the two. The males, they're pretty tiny, and when it's time to mate, they just simply fuse together. That's wrong on so many levels. Number 7. Fire whirl. Now we'll do another natural disaster where this time we talk about a fire tornado, or more accurately, a fire whirl. You might know a certain biblical story that discusses a pillar of fire coming down from heaven, and this, though, is the non-godly version of that, and yes, they do occur naturally in the world. But not unlike tornadoes, they have a much more specific way of being crafted. Typically, a fire whirl will begin in conditions where there's already a fire. The winds will pick up the fire, smoke, and ash, and even eventually create a pillar that looks a lot like a tornado. The wind and temperature conditions are crucial for this to occur, and when they do form, they can get up to 160 feet tall. Now, to be clear, they never get bulky enough to do as much damage as a real tornado, but they are definitely still a threat. Number 6. Desert mirages. Have you ever felt that the world was perhaps screwing with you? Like, perhaps you had a bad day that just wouldn't end, and you blamed everything that was out there. Well, sadly, the planet is out to get you at times, and Mother Nature knows how to tighten the screws. For example, if you're out in the desert, and there are reasons to be out there legitimately, you may want to make sure that you prepare for the long haul. To not do that will mean that you'd be out of resources pretty quickly, and that can lead to the desert making you see things that may not be there. Mirages are very common in the desert, and most people see water as it's what they're most desperate for. So don't be fooled, as that'll make you exert even more energy, and then you'll really be in trouble. Number 5. Alligator snapping turtle. In the world, as you've already seen, there are some creatures that you inherently perceive as either docile or not capable of doing any kind of real harm, but not unlike mirages, you shouldn't be fooled by such notions. Just as there are sharks that don't care about humans, there are creatures like this one that will bite your finger off if you provoke it. The alligator snapping turtle is one such example of that. The beast of a turtle has an impressive size and power to match. Those jaws are more than capable of crushing your bones and could easily make you lose part of your hand. So if you do see one of them, you may want to quickly go in the other direction. Number 4. The goblin shark. One last creature of the deep, the goblin shark, is another living fossil, and true to the word, this one is freaky as all get out. Now I'll get right to the point. When it wants to eat its prey, it doesn't have to go right up to it to chomp down on it. Rather, it's going to extend its mouth well outside of its natural body, and that's the way that it gets it. The thing is a living representation of the xenomorph form of aliens, but without the desire to find Sigourney Weaver. The only good thing about this fish is that it lives in the depths of the ocean, so nobody really has to encounter it unless you go way down there. And trust me, that's not something you probably want to do. Number 3. Tsunamis. I'll be touching on all 3 subtopics in the last entries here, beginning with this one last natural disaster. In the last 10 years or so, the world has been racked by various tsunamis. They're so deadly and dangerous that they can wipe out coastlines, send homes and people into the ocean to be lost forever, and even more. Equally as bad, the initial wave of the tsunami can be hundreds of feet high and carry on for miles and miles, and if you look some of them up that hit Japan or the islands of the Indian Ocean, you can't tell me that they're not scary. What's worse, they can come out of nowhere and can't be easily planned for or predicted. They're a wave of death, and more will happen in our lifetime, and that's absolutely terrifying. Number 2. The Amazon rainforest. You may be surprised that a place like the Amazon is the second to last entry on this list, but here's the thing. When you really think about it, the Amazon rainforest is perhaps the scariest place on the planet. To be clear, I'm talking about if you really dive into the rainforest and try to explore it. There's a reason that it's one of the only non-mapped parts of the surface world. The forest is so thick and full of danger that all expeditions to map it out have ended in disaster. Just some of the dangers that you can face are vicious predators, deadly plants, disease, a lack of resources, and the intense heat of being in the forest itself. Oh, and there are also some indigenous people that are said to reside there, and they don't really take well to trespassers. Some places are meant to be left alone, and the Amazon is probably one of them, until it's totally chopped down, that is. Number 1. Killer bees. It's only right that if we're going to end things, we should do it in an arguably one of the most scariest ways possible by talking about killer bees. Now, there are some misconceptions about bees and how killer they can be. The truth is that unless you have an allergic reaction, getting stung by 1 or 2 of them is probably not bad. However, there are exceptions to every rule, and the killer bee species is that exception. These bees were genetically modified and then accidentally released, which is how every horror movie begins. Anyways, they went from South America to North America, and they do have a trend that makes them deadly. They're going to sting you in swarms and not stop swarming you until you're absolutely dead. They have killed humans in the past, 1,000-pound hogs, and other creatures just by repeatedly stinging them until they were gone. That'll be another reason you don't want to touch a hive. That's all from the various realms of nature and how they can be scary on multiple levels. Which of these incidents do you think were legitimately scary? And have you ever been a part of any of the events that were similar to the ones you saw today? Or do you know of any other ones that should be on this list? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. Check out the other cool things that are showing up on the screen, and I'll see you next time.